we landed just between Arromanches and Gold Beach, which was Ver-sur-Mer. And when we landed, we didn't actually even get our feet wet, because the ship we were on had these big doors on the front that opened up, and they floated round what they called a rhino. That was a big raft with a couple of motors on the back which drove it along, and it was steered by the Royal Naval chaps, and they brought this big raft round to the front of our ship, and it was there for the vehicles to drive off our ship onto this raft. And that's what we did. We got off with our actually balloon was attached to a Bren gun carrier, which took us off onto this raft, and then we drove up onto the beach. So we stepped off of this onto dry land. We didn't even get our feet wet. I remember that making our way after we'd landed, and we were heading for the site that we were supposed to be putting our barrage on. I remember going along this track and suddenly hearing a shell come over from Le Havre, and this chucking ourselves down on the ground, and there was a dead soldier lying there. And I lay right down beside him, and he was just lying there with covered with a gas cape over his head and his part of his body, and two big army boots sticking up. And this poor bloke, I don't know who he was, what regiment he was, anything, but just lying down beside him as this shell came over and exploded in the distance away from us. Now, I always remember that very clearly. I don't know who he was, but he was one of many that had been killed. Very sad. But afterwards we got up, pressed on, and got to where we were supposed to be, and that was it. I say the lads brewed up, as was pretty general with everybody. They all seemed to, whatever the conditions, they all had to brew. I remember this tank crew particularly. These chaps with a great big tank by the side of them. They were all sitting down there, quite happy, all just drinking tea. And a few minutes later, they'd be up in the front line in action. Those sort of things, and those sort of things stick in your memory. Well, it was the first time I'd ever seen a German in the war. You know, we've been in the services all for five and a half years then, and that was the first time we'd seen a German, and they were. Some of them were quite cocky, especially the SS prisoners. They were, you know, sneering at us and that sort of thing, and generally very arrogant. Not the ordinary German soldier, but the SS were very arrogant, spitting at you as you walk past and that sort of thing, you know. But they were soon shipped off down to the beach and put on the landing craft that we'd been on and taken back to England as prisoners. The shells were still coming over from Le Havre. The odd shell was coming over, but apart from that, everything was highly organised, and everybody seemed. We had beach masters who were telling us what we had to do and where we had to go, and we had these maps showing us where our particular objective was, which from where we landed was a couple of miles along the beach. So we had to take this balloon, which was inflated, and walk along the beach with it to the position where we were going to fly it from. And the only frightening thing about that was that one was worried about treading on a mine, because we'd been warned that the place was heavily mined, and we also had been told that if you could see the track of a vehicle had gone along, the best thing to do was to walk in that track, then you'd be safe, and that's what we did. And apart from the odd shell that came over from Le Havre, we reached our objective, which, as I say, was Ver-sur-Mer, and we went up the hillside to near enough where we were supposed to be with this balloon, and we stayed there, and the first thing we did, I think, was have a brew up, from what I remember. We certainly didn't fly the balloon, it was anchored down. And then the next thing we did was dig a slit trench for each of us in the sand, so as we got a bit of cover if we needed it. I suppose really we'd been sort of trained to do this, all these exercises we'd been on. It didn't come as a big surprise. We were the only ones that knew how to do the barrage, being trained at RAF, and so we just got on. It was just a job of work, and when we'd got in position and got our balloon inflated and ready to fly, we didn't really, I don't think we thought a lot about it at all. It was just a question of thank God we're here. And we dug in, and as night fell, we used our slit trenches to get in and sleep. And we didn't sleep very much, I must confess, because the German Air Force came over and they were machine gunning the beach. And in the morning of D-Day +1, that was June the 6th, June the 7th, they came over very early in the morning and flew up and down the beach machine gunning it. And that was a bit frightening, and that's when we got in the old slit trench and dug down. But we didn't fly the barrage, we didn't put the balloons up at all. Because the RAF Fighter Command had such superiority over the German Air Force that, I mean, except from the odd plane, we never saw a German plane.